impressive for Samantha to share her personal story and her journey. And it's a journey to be continued, and can't wait what you pull off in the coming years to come. And the parenting topic continues in Bitcoin. As we Bitcoiners ask ourselves the question of what is money, at some point we'll probably have to have the same conversation somehow with our children. And when that happens, how do we even begin to talk to them about Bitcoin? And next up, we are welcoming parents, educators, to join us and talk about parents in Bitcoin and how, as Bitcoiners, can we talk to our children about money, about Bitcoin, about sovereignty, agency, about everything really, and guide them through this massive rabbit hole in a structured, organized way that's full of love, care, and philosophical insights coming from the wisdom of parents and our fellow educators and other Bitcoiners. So let's welcome Scott, Jens, and Benjamin, which is actually Samantha's father, who just went on stage, to give us some insights into their approaches, their challenges, and opportunities that are ahead of us. Welcome.
Okay. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm back up here, and I'm very excited to have this panel with two amazing Bitcoiner and two amazing parents, I guess, as well. I'm gonna try to cover some grounds, because me as a principal, I teach Bitcoin in my school, and so there are parents asking about stuff. Many parents are not deep into the technical stuff. They get the sense of Bitcoin and everything, and we're gonna maybe cover some ground here today. Maybe we can start that you kind of introduce yourself for people that don't know you.
Sure. So, hi everyone. I'm Ben Duval, probably best known as Sam's dad. So, if you've just enjoyed her talk, then I'm the guy who taught her what she knows about Bitcoin so far in general. But aside from that, I've been a Bitcoiner since 2010. I discovered it very, very early. And I've been working in the space since 2017, so it's quite a few years now working directly in the Bitcoin space. My background is mostly technical, so I focus largely on technical discussions around Bitcoin, but I also go quite a lot into philosophy and that kind of thing. Politically, I'm an anarchist, and I think that motivates a lot of my thinking around Bitcoin and even why I got into Bitcoin to begin with.
Thank you.
Hi, my name's Scott Wolfe. After this week, I'm known as Malika's dad. Based in Toronto, Canada. I've been a Bitcoiner since about 2019. I spent about 20 years in community health and development, running a couple of nonprofits globally focused on connecting community health centers. Learned about Bitcoin in 2019 at first, just as the money of the internet, and as a curious investment, and went down the proverbial rabbit hole and really came to discover many of the unique properties of Bitcoin and the use cases for Bitcoin, and really was able to see the work that I've been doing in community health and development, trying to address what I then perceived as many of the upstream causes of illness and social distress through new eyes, thanks to studying and learning about what money actually is and what Bitcoin enables us to do. And so last year, finally took leave of that past work, even though it's very important to me still to pursue community health and development through a Bitcoin lens. And so now have two roles in the Bitcoin ecosystem. In Canada, I'm the first executive director of what's called the Bitcoin Coalition of Canada, which is a not-for-profit organization dedicated to supporting educators, meetups, and local Bitcoin networks, as well as to engage policymakers and media around Bitcoin to demystify it and try to advance education, adoption, and use. And then, more near and dear to my heart, as coordinator of the Federation of Bitcoin Circular Economies to help connect emerging and newfound Bitcoin circular economies around the world to share insights, innovative practices, and to support each other to advance the use of Bitcoin as money and the development of local Bitcoin circular economies based in Toronto, Canada.
Nice. Thank you so much for your introduction. And I want to start with like the bigger picture. And my question would be like, how did Bitcoin influence your parental approach in general?
So yeah, that is actually a big question. So, like I mentioned, actually, politically I'm an anarchist, and that's why I got into Bitcoin to begin with. So, I would actually say Bitcoin hasn't changed me much as a person, and therefore probably hasn't changed how I would parent much as a person, because a lot of my philosophical approaches towards, should I be authoritarian and tell my kids, you do this now, I'm telling you do this, versus letting them discover errors on their own and then helping them through, I would have been that way already. But that said, of course, obviously, Bitcoin has changed how I approach money with my kids, and teaching them ideas about things like, the idea of inflation and how it works, the idea of how stable money allows more flourishing in society and in the world. So as a Bitcoin family, my kids get their pocket money in Bitcoin. We use Bitcoin as our daily money. I'm actually paid in Bitcoin, so it's actually honestly easier for me to do it that way. We don't really hold fiat in our house. Occasionally I'll use fiat as a medium of exchange, but it's, we're a Bitcoin family. So if I, for example, give Sam pocket money in Bitcoin and she wants to buy something from the supermarket, then maybe she'll use BitRefill or something like that to buy a gift card, and that's just how we approach money in our household.
I mean, that's amazing. You kind of live on a Bitcoin standard then.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is the top game you can get, I guess. What would you say? Did it influence your parenting more than your parenting?
Well, I'd echo much of what Ben said, but I'd add perhaps a couple of additional things unique to my journey in the world. So a little bit about me. I guess I would characterize myself historically as sort of a social democrat. For those in Canada, the United States, Europe, sort of aligned with a progressive political movement and what that meant to me. I would say small p progressive, not capital P progressive. I don't want to go into a long tangent on the distinction between those, but really that, believe that there is a role for government, believe in addressing many historical inequities through particular remedial actions. I believe in addressing upstream challenges in society, and I believe that there is and can be a role for the state in all of that. And in so much as that characterizes much of who I am, I would say up until about 5 years was really, I would say, captive to political tribalism in society, and very much, someone who was encamped with people who thought and felt a certain way, and therefore assumed and thought a certain way about people who weren't like us. I was captured by that political tribalism, and I really thank the Bitcoin journey for really putting me in contact with a lot of people who don't think like me on the surface, or who use what I now call their own coded language, and realize that I was part of using my own coded language. And by virtue of giving me exposure to and connecting with people via Bitcoin who may have differences of opinions or may use differently coded language, and giving me a meeting place, I've actually come to appreciate the extent to which we live these tribalized political societies where politics are sport and where we're called to choose our team and other the other. And that goes both ways, left, right, etc. And so I think Bitcoin has provided me the ability to actually reclaim the middle and to actually try to decode language, to try to look at intention, to try to ask people, what do they mean when they say X, Y, or Z, and to invite them to do the same with me. And that's given me a very different disposition in the world in terms of how I enter into the world, how I engage people, and by extension, how I engage my kids and how I ask them to engage the world. And so I think I'm trying by example and through different experiences to try to help them be critical thinkers, to occupy that center, and to, interrogate things that come their way, wherever that might be from, whether it's from the political left, the political right, coded language, etc., to really ask them to interrogate those things. So it's really affected who I am and how I walk in the world, but how I, invite them to engage the world that they're walking through. I don't think that would have happened were it not for Bitcoin. So that's one thing. The second thing I would just say is really, through the process of learning Bitcoin and all of these things that we talk about, low time preference and what that really means in application. And so, have tried to reclaim time as the most precious resource, and it's a work in progress. I'm still that person who is sort of a recovering workaholic who always has to be busy doing something, but I think it's at least provided me a filter through which to engage and to say, like, no, step back, look after self, look after family. Your time with them is the most important thing, and just really help me find, a bit more of an anchor.
Okay, so I saw some common ground when you say, like, both of you will be pretty much into the low time preference, that it might have changed the way you look at the future, that you have like a low time preference, and the kind of two complete opposite political views, which is kind of super interesting as it gets to the same point with the low time preference, just from two sides. So that for me is super interesting. Would you say, like in one or two words, like would you say Bitcoin has influenced your parenting a lot? Yes or no?
No, it's affected me, and therefore who I am and how I gauge the world. I wouldn't say necessarily that it's affected my parenting, though.
Okay, so what I also get from both of you is you try to lead by example, right? You live and lead by example, and for you it's the same.
Yeah, very much lead by example, and also allow our kids to make the mistakes. So, if, just as a silly example, when my kids were very young, if my 3-year-old was going to, stick their hand in a fire, of course I would stop them, that's just common sense. But with things which aren't going to hurt them physically, or maybe, just it's only going to be a little bit of pain, I will let them do it, because learning that lesson is better than being told that lesson. So, let them discover mistakes on their own, let them learn from those mistakes, and that way they will be more responsible. Actually, just as a little tangent, I noticed recently Australia is talking about making social media, or is going to make social media for everyone under the age of 16 illegal. So they're stopping anyone under the age of 16 from using social media. Sam, my daughter, uses social media. She's 13 and she's been using social media for a couple of years. And she's good with it now. When she first started using it, like every kid, she was kind of addicted to the screen and like, oh yeah, I have to get more of this, I have to do this. But now she knows when to put it away. She knows how to use it for a bit of time, and then put it away when it's the right time to put it away. Because I've given her the chance to learn from it and to learn from what happens if you do it wrong. So I think that's the approach to parenting that I generally take, and I think it's worked out better than the authoritarian approach of saying, no, you can't do this.
And would you say there is like there is this one point where you need to interrupt, or where what is that point? Because I see with social media and everything, I mean, in my school it's the same. We always try, and I'm probably much more like you, to give as much freedom as possible to the kids. But when is that point of like where you have to interrupt, because those algorithms are programmed that they are made for those kids' brains that they are still developing, and they get them addicted?
So essentially it's a battle of the dopamine hits in a lot of ways. So they're getting the dopamine hit from social media, But also, you know, I think allowing punishments to happen naturally, and by punishment I mean a punishment from the world around them, not from myself. Yeah. So, you know, let's say Sam decided to be all night on social media. Yeah, she still has to get up in the morning and she still has her responsibilities. So being incredibly tired is the punishment. I don't need to give her a separate, hey, I'm taking your phone off you, or hey, you know, you're missing out on visiting your friends or whatever. No, just being overly tired is something that she's going to have to deal with from being up all night. Yeah. And those are the kinds of things that I kind of hammer home. You know, if she misses dinner because she was doing something with her friends and I told her, hey, dinner is at this time, you need to be home. If you're not home in time, no dinner. Then she'll be hungry, and that's something she has to learn and accept.
Yeah, fair enough. What's your approach, like how you deal with social media? Maybe you can quickly say you have 3 kids, which age, and what's your plan of introducing them to social media?
Sure. Yeah, so I have 3 kids, 12, who's the oldest, 9 and 7. It's a bit of a daily circus, chaos, just getting everything moving, getting people to where they need to be on time, and you know, get through all the daily activities of life, eating, dishes, laundry, social activities, work, etc. So there's not an abundance of time for all of that. So trying to keep things moving. So that's one of the, one of the determining factors in everything is really trying to just make sure everything that gets done. And as a result of that, yes, on occasion we do resort to a little bit of authoritarianism. We try to limit it, and are big believers in natural consequences and really trying to let these things take their courses. So it's a bit of a dance. I would say, our oldest has access in some limited degree to a telephone, and it's sort of with age more rights, more access to things, but also more responsibility, and so has access to a phone, and gradually a bit more rights to that. We are trying to limit it, access to the phone and access to social media a little bit. They're beautiful, malleable brains, and trying to protect that. It's also a challenge in the context of multiple children where they feel that if the other one got something or gets access to something, that therefore they should as well, and so I know that's a little bit unfair to the older one to say, well, no, you can't because the younger ones can't, etc. But it's a bit of a dance and navigating all of that. So I have no perfect answer, just to say that it's an ongoing negotiation and point of discussion.
Good point.
But I've also been enlightened by some of Ben's thoughts this week. We've had conversations and want to give it more thought. Like the other thing that it's a bit challenging. So here I am, trying to help my daughter, my oldest, understand Bitcoin, and seeing that she's somewhat excited about it, but she doesn't have access to a phone. Well, how does she have a wallet then, and how does she make practical use of this, and how does she make the connections that I'm telling her are so exciting and crucial in this digital world of ours, and that this is all just abstract for her. So it is a bit of a living contradiction. I'm grappling with it. I'm still trying to figure that out. For me, it's that this is a living sort of tension of how to find balance with it all.
And if you mean, like, there's also the social pressure, if like the peer group all using social media and then they want to do the same, so there's no social pressure for you, which is good. But yeah, it's super hard to navigate through all of that. I totally agree. Okay, let's go from like social media and the financial possibilities Bitcoin gives us more to the educational perspective on Bitcoin. What would you say is the right age, if you can say so, to introduce Bitcoin to your children? Is there a right age? Will it happen organically? What's your approach on that?
So I can't say is there a right age or not. I don't know. but I can tell you for my kids, I introduced Bitcoin to them in the same way that I introduced the rest of the world to them. So I discovered Bitcoin in 2010, as I mentioned, and Samantha was born in 2011. So Bitcoin has been around, from before she was born, and she's grown up with it. It's just been a part of our lives. I teach her about the world. I teach her, hey, look, this is how I drive a car. Hey, look, this is different countries. Hey, look, this is how money works, and this is Bitcoin, which is a part of how money works. So, it's just always been there. Actually, it was kind of funny. When she was very young, I don't think she realized that there was, that not everybody used Bitcoin. I think she actually thought Bitcoin was this normal thing that everybody used out in the world, and it was just all over the place. And it was only later she realized, when she got her first phone, for example, I installed a wallet for her, and she went out and thought, okay, I'd like to buy ice cream, but what do you mean they don't take Bitcoin? And so that was kind of this interesting moment of learning for her there.
So for you, it's kind of, you are the wrong role model to answer that question, because Bitcoin was there from the very beginning.
Exactly, yeah. I never had to introduce my kids to it, because it was just a part of their journey growing up.
Yeah. What would you say to parents here that just discovered Bitcoin maybe during the last 3-4 years?
Yep.
How would you would you give any advice on how to do?
I mean, it depends on how old the kids are, what they already know. But I would say anyone with very young kids, it doesn't hurt to do what I did. Let them grow up with Bitcoin as a part. Yikes. Let them grow up with Bitcoin as a part of their life, and just make it normal for them, because you should always be. The world the kids are growing up into is not the world that we grew up in. Their world is not our world. They are growing up into a world which is a future of our world. When I grew up, there was no social media. But it would be a mistake to say, I didn't have social media, therefore you shouldn't. I didn't have Bitcoin growing up, therefore you don't need to know about Bitcoin. It doesn't make sense to do that. The kids are growing up in a different world than we grew up in, and we should be trying to prepare them for the world that they will have, not the world that we had.
Yeah, fair enough. So, what about you? There is not I think when you discovered Bitcoin in 2019, you said your oldest one was already kind of 7.
Yep.
Yeah, so was it also from the very beginning, or how did it work for you, and what would you give as an advice to other parents?
So from about 2019 to 2021, was, I wouldn't say I was secretive about Bitcoin, but it was just this, curious adventure I was on, and realizing that, okay, there was an investment use case for Bitcoin, and beginning to tune into how and where Bitcoin was being used, and grasping its additional use cases. And there was at some point, from 2019 to 2021, it's all a bit foggy to me now. The light bulb went on, and I'm like, oh, this is actually a tool for community empowerment and advancing, causes that I've committed myself to in other ways for 30 or more years. And then I was off to the races, and then it became sort of normalized in terms of, me to talk about Bitcoin. Now I'm going to be doing a Bitcoin thing, Bitcoin. And members of my family would then start to hear about it more, because I was dedicating myself more to it. It's been an evolution. I quite honestly have had to grow into my degree of comfort, and find those moments of reassurance that, no, I'm not crazy. This is, in fact, a revolutionary tool that can achieve the impacts that many of us say it can, and seeing that in action more and more, and to the extent that I've become more comfortable and reassured in that, is the extent to which I've more actively tried to plant seeds on the home front about it. I'm also aware that in our context, and so I'd say, context matters probably, because I imagine parents somewhere like El Salvador or in Kenya or somewhere else where the immediate use case, by virtue of severe currency debasement and a lack of access to financial rails and highly cash-based economies, et cetera, make the necessity of Bitcoin that much more evident. It's much easier to demonstrate the practical applications, right? Whereas I live in Toronto, where we have a decent financial system with, still terrible money, but that by comparison is relatively functional. And so I recognize that it's not going to be easy to make this immediately relevant to my kids or to adults for that matter, because the immediacy of need isn't as acute as it is in other locations. And so, I've tried to plant seeds, right? A soft touch with, for the kids with books, and trying to talk to them a little bit about the characteristics of Bitcoin. And then as I know that they are taking an interest in certain things, Malika and the other kids for that matter are interested in human rights. They read this story called, this series of stories, for instance, called Goodnight Stories for Rebel Girls, right? Which talks about, these anecdotes of amazing freedom fighters and activists around the world. A couple of them actually are Bitcoin adjacent, and so trying to activate that sort of sensibility related to Bitcoin and say, that Papa's involved in this because it's actually empowering communities that are 99% unbanked, and it's helping people in authoritarian dictatorial regimes to actually find personal financial freedom and to escape persecution, etc. And so as I make those a bit more real for them, even though they don't get the technical details and know, that, a Bitcoin is divisible into 100 million sats and, the timeline and the monetary policy and all of that, they grasp the utility. And I think that that's the seed. And I'm just trying to come at it from that approach.
Yeah. So you already mentioned the technical aspect, which is another big approach for, like I already mentioned too, for many parents. They want to stack sats. They might just be starting and they don't know where to start or how to start. For example, like in my school, there's a mom. She has 3 kids and she wants to give her the allowance in Bitcoin. What would you say she should do? Because like she says, there's like there's a lack of a product that you have like a wallet with like sub-wallets where you have it like easy, and for non-technical guys and people where you can say, okay, there's sub-wallet child 1, sub-wallet child 2, sub-wallet child 3. What would your take on that be?
So I agree there is a lack of a nice product for that, but actually something could probably be built on top of LNbits relatively easily to do that, because LNbits does have the idea of sub-wallets all coming from one wallet. So if somebody wants to build something like that out there, I think it would be highly, highly appreciated.
Yes, I can tell you yes.
Yep. But in general, so for my kids, I give them their pocket money in Bitcoin. The biggest thing I think that other parents should think about is, what are their kids going to do with this money and how are they going to use it? Bitcoin is not easy to spend everywhere, especially, I'm living in Germany, near Dresden, which is, not exactly the kind of town where you expect there to be a lot of Bitcoin acceptance. Actually, surprisingly, there's like 1 beer garden, 1 bakery, and 1 Vietnamese restaurant, and like 1,000 dentists for no sensible reason, but that's, so there are some places where Bitcoin can be spent directly, but there are also alternatives. So, if Sam here wants to go to the supermarket, she can use BitRefill, and she knows how to use it, so she can just buy a Rewe gift card with BitRefill and go to the supermarket and use it. So she knows how to use her money, but also she sees that Bitcoin's value does increase over time compared to the local currency. So she also learns that lesson, again, one of those consequence type things. Spend all of your money now and you've got the opportunity cost problem that you could have saved that money and it could be worth more. So it also helps to teach the kids about savings, to see the value of the money that they are holding actually increasing over time. So I'd say those are the two aspects. One, the savings aspect, and the other, make sure they know how to spend it, because otherwise all you're doing is an enforced hodl. You're forcing the kids to hold it, and that's actually not useful as a lesson for them. They're not going to learn anything. It's no different than seeing some random number written down on a piece of paper. They need to actually see that this is a real thing that they can make choices with.
Yeah, I totally get what you say when they see the value is rising, because as I introduced Bitcoin to the kids in my school, like beginning of this year kind of, and also earlier on, but like really sent them some sets earlier this year, and they now see the value is growing, and the more I have in Bitcoin, the better it is. I think it's a process that takes some time, that the kids, they also need to take their time. If they spend it, it's their fault, of course, but how can you make sure that as a parent, your kids are not spending the Bitcoin on any shitcoins? How can you make sure that they don't buy Ethereum, for example?
Actually, I can't make sure of that, but what I can do is tell them why it's an incredibly bad idea and why they probably don't want to make that kind of mistake. But if they do make that kind of mistake, they're going to learn a very hard lesson from it. But yeah, I would say, if they do something like that, it's their mistake and it's their lesson to learn.
Yeah. Would you be okay with your kids buying Ethereum?
Well, I'd be a complete hypocrite if I was to say, if I was to, punish them for doing, or I don't know what I could do, but I'm one of the probably 98% of people, who are Bitcoin only now, who's come to it by way of like a degree of shitcoinery, right? Like I touched the burner myself and learned the lesson. Thankfully, without too much loss. But I think that's all part of the learning journey and natural consequences, and do my best to explain as we go along why Bitcoin and why Bitcoin only. But they're going to do what they're going to do, and they're going to have to learn the lesson.
So also leading by example, they know what can go wrong if you go shitcoin only.
Absolutely, and I mean one of the things that I just as a mental tool to get people thinking about this, I said, have you ever heard of Cardano Beach? Have you ever heard of like Solana Akasi? Have you? So just to put this in the perspective of like the distinguishing the utility of this and the value of it and what it's unleashing in the way of transformative change globally from the speculative casino-like qualities of all of these other things. These other tokens have been around for so long, and I don't see these practical life-changing, societal transformative consequences there. So like that should be cause to like think hard about
totally
touching
agree
them.
on that. Because like right now, what is I'm principal. I try to bring Bitcoin in German schools, and you can imagine it's super hard because Bitcoin, that like scammy thing, whatever. That's like the image we still have. And now what's happening right now is just super nice, because it's like one example after the other that it's not that scammy thing, that it's like something real, that it's something worth to learn about. And this could be the future. El Salvador will be the golden land in a few years, probably. They have a high chance of doing that. And if you have like really well-known German banks, I don't know if you heard about Raiffeisenbank, Bayern Mitte, that they accept Bitcoin, imagine now all the German Bitcoin companies, they go to this bank because they know they're pro-Bitcoin. We have the ETFs, we have all of that, so as you said, it gets more and more serious stuff, and you can't unsee it anymore at one point, and it will continue and continue and continue. And for me, I really love it because it makes you so like balanced, and everything will be fine because Bitcoin is doing its thing. All right, I think we have like a couple of minutes left. I wanted to ask one more question for sure, and that is, can you say as a Bitcoiner, as a true Bitcoiner, it is good to send kids to a public school? Yes or no? And if yes, and if no, why?
I don't think yes or no is the appropriate answer because I think it always depends and it's very complicated. But I can say my kids have been to both private school and public school. The private school that they went to was the international school system, the IB school system. And now they're at public school, and the German public school system is absolutely awful. It is absolutely destroying my kids' educational will. They used to love learning, and now they just have zero interest in what the school is teaching. So I have to do a lot more work now at home to really keep their interest up. Maybe not every public school is like that. Maybe some of them are okay, but my experience with public schools has been incredibly bad. As you well know, Germany has a school requirement. I can't homeschool in Germany. So we're actually looking at leaving Germany because of how bad the schooling is. So we're actually probably going to be moving out of the country in the near future.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, again, context matters. I know that there are some countries where public education is better than others in terms of pedagogical approach, resources, accessibility, et cetera, et cetera. So in our context, in our context, we're fairly pleased with the public education system. In the province of Ontario we reside, there are 4 different pillars to public education. There's English public and French language public, and then there's also English Catholic and French language Catholic. Our kids are in the French language public, so they're educated entirely in French, but in a predominantly English-speaking environment. And so, for us, it's about the trade-offs of anything. Life is all about trade-offs, everything, and I don't expect it to fulfill everything for her. But for us, in the context of where we are and the options that we have, it's the best option to suit our family dynamics. But we know that there are things that are going to be missing, and we try to complement them as much as possible at home. I'm a big fan of that, that saying, don't let school get in the way of your education, as Mark Twain once said, and you carry that forward. That's why my daughter is here with me this week, missing a week of school, because this is this is 2 years worth of education this week, right here, in terms of the people she's meeting, the conversations, the surrounding cultural engagements, et cetera. So I would say yes to public education, but make sure you complement that with applied learning at home, with opportunities to get that education outside of school. So for me, it's a qualified yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's good. That's great.
But I also love the Montessori system. I'm a fan of the Montessori system too. I'll just add.
Yeah. As I said, there are many different school systems, and I think in general for Bitcoiner, they probably, if you see at the percentage how many Bitcoiners sending their kids to a private school, it is probably higher. For sure, it is higher than the rest. I think we're time-wise. Do we have time for questions or fine? One more. Okay, perfect. So I think we already covered quite some ground. It was a super interesting talk. Thanks for being here. Are there any questions from parents here in the audience or from kids in the audience that you would like to ask? All right, perfect. Then thank you so much, both of you. It was a pleasure talking to you and getting those different insights also. And talk to you later probably too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.